Minister,
Yes.
it says on the government Good morning and welcome to another Bermuda's News and Views. I'm your host, Don Burgess. The sun is out and it's a beautiful sunny day here. And we are privileged to have Walter Roban, the Deputy Premier, on with us. Welcome, Mr. Roban.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burgess, for having me on once again. Happy to come on Bermuda's Live.
I think I'm going to have to be like Saturday Night Live and start getting jackets for the Five-Timer Club and get you one, because I think you may be the person who's been on the most with us.
Well, I'm happy to take opportunities to come and talk to the public on issues that they're interested in and things that we would like to make sure they know that's going on in government, and particularly with my ministry. And, you know, we've had the general election. It's now time to get back to work and moving forward with the agenda that the government has laid out. So I'm happy to come and talk and hear your questions and answer any questions that the public might have about what we're planning to do.
And I would like to point out, if you have a question for the minister, we're going to be talking about renewable energy, but if you have a question for the minister, you can put them in the comments on the side, and we'll see if we can get to them. And as a matter of fact, on Saturday, we ran into each other at Lindo's a bit, and you spoke of your passion for renewable energy. Why is this topic so important to you?
Well, I have, for quite a bit of time in my role in government, had a keen interest in renewable energy. I have believed that it was clearly the direction that Bermuda should go into, long before perhaps it was maybe so much on the minds and thoughts of many people. It was clear that Bermuda needed to have a different energy future. And I've always been committed to that. And as far back as when I was energy minister in 2010, over 10 years ago, I was committed to seeing us shape our energy future. We produced an energy white paper in 2011. And in that paper were the ingredients for what Bermuda could do. Some of the objectives that have been reached, but I'm very much committed to that now, because it's not just about renewable energy, it's about clean energy, it's about how we can improve our environment, and the great opportunities for investment and jobs that renewable energy will bring to the country.
Okay. Now, what are some of the objectives that we've already reached from that 2011 white paper?
Well, we established the regulatory authority, one. Two, we have sectoral legislation which governs the electricity sector. We have also an integrated resource plan, which is a clear roadmap for Bermuda developing a renewable energy future and what is feasible and what is possible. These are all aspects of what was envisioned out of that original white policy paper. And I'm happy to see that it's coming to fruition. We unfortunately haven't met the goals of some of the other key milestones that could have been reached. And that's unfortunate for Bermuda, but sometimes things happen in the right time. And a lot of opportunities right now have existed that didn't even exist 5 years ago. And costs related to the conversion from fossil fuel to renewable energy have gone down considerably, not only from 10 years, but also in the last few years. So Bermuda is positioned to actually do a lot more in this area. There are other islands that are making leaps and bounds and have made great strides. And it's now understood even more than it was years ago that this is the best way for many islands to preserve their own environment, to decouple themselves from fossil fuel dependence, and to develop a clean energy future, is to embrace renewable energy and all that comes with it.
Right. Now, I know in the other places in the world, countries and states in the U.S., they've set targets as to when they want to be 100% on renewable energy. Does Bermuda, or is Bermuda going to set targets like that? I know like California wants to be 100% renewable energy free by 2045.
Yes, Don, the answer is yes. We do have targets. We have the target of being at the goal of 85% clean energy, renewable energy by 2035. So I think we always have to put these things into perspective. Compared to some other of the states and jurisdictions in the United States, we are very different. And it's important that we construct solutions that fit our island example, rather than trying to mirror what other jurisdictions, particularly land-based jurisdictions, set for themselves. Because the issues are different when it comes to energy. But we believe that our goals that have been set through the integrated resource plan are reachable. And there are real opportunities not only for Bermuda to be somewhat of an example of an island that's making that conversion, but also there are opportunities to create new jobs, new technical skills for us to become almost self-sufficient and achieve energy independence if we follow this path. That is a goal of most islands. It's not going to be an easy path, but I do believe it's feasible. And the technologies that we're embracing to do it are actually all confirmed technologies, even though there may be some 10, 20 years from now that may come about, which may be interesting for us to consider. Right now, that goal is based on feasible, proven technologies that are already in the marketplace, that are already being used throughout the world.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the jobs, because yesterday you had a press release and you were talking about meeting with Bermuda College to help provide training for up to 20 people to become level 1 solar installers.
Yes.
what role do you see solar energy playing in Bermuda's future as far as renewable energy? Is that like going to be the number one source?
Well, it'll be one of a number of sources, but it actually is perhaps the most feasible in its deployment right now. As you know, there is a utility scale solar array down at the airport, near the airport at the Finger, which is has the capability of producing between 6 to 8 megawatts of power. That power will be used by the utility to supplement its whenever it uses or has the need for increased base load, that the when the load is at its capacity and its highest, that energy that's generated by the Finger, which will be saved through battery power, can be used to supplement their peak load, requirement when it gets to that, instead of the utility having to use engines that they have to use fossil fuel. So it's going to help bring down just slightly the cost of energy for everyone across the board. But there are other opportunities. There are at least 8,000 to 10,000 homes, Don, in Bermuda that potentially can benefit from solar energy right now. So there's an opportunity there for all those homes to benefit. That benefit, if realized, will assist with creating a infrastructure that the whole island can rely on when it comes to benefiting from renewable energy. Because each home can sell that power back to the grid, and that power can be used to help stabilize and bring down some of the costs related to producing fossil fuels via, energy via fossil fuels.
Right.
So if we can reach the goal of 20 additional 10 to 20 megawatts of renewable energy through solar, then and that should be a goal that we're looking to reach around 2023, not too far from now, but it is possible. And I'm not saying that every one of those 8,000 to 10,000 homes is going to have renewable power, but if we can have a significant uptick in the deployment of solar, that will go very far to helping to bring down the cost of energy production by the main utility and stabilize costs for everyone. And we won't necessarily have to be plagued by all the time by that fuel fuel adjustment rate that everybody sees pop up on their bill every month, and they scratch their heads. Well, why am I paying this money? But okay, we're paying it because of the cost of fossil fuel and the impact that has on the production of power in Bermuda. So we're trying to find ways that can be brought down. Solar energy can contribute to that.
Now, I know, going back to California again, because they always seem to be leading the way in terms of trying to be more green, but they passed a law, I believe it was last year, that all new homes had to be built with solar panels on it. Is that something feasible for Bermuda, that new builds should have solar panels on them?
I do believe that is actually quite feasible. I'll be speaking more about this going forward as to some of the work that we're doing with the planning department, which is under my ministry, to actually ensure that conservation and efficiency measures like the installation of solar are not necessarily seen as an accessory to a development, but will become an essential part of a development, just like the appropriate electrical system is, just like having a particular type of water heating is, or even certain types of the size of windows and other features which are a part of the building code. It is our intention to look at ways that we can make sure that putting in conservation efficiency measures such as solar panels on suitable developments will become a requirement and not just an option.
Right. Now, Sally De Silva has posted a question that was actually on my list. She says not everyone can afford solar panels. She says she'd love to have them, but the dollars is really expensive. how can we help people to help ourselves overall by affording to buy these solar panels?
Well, I'm very happy to answer Mr. Silva's question. One of the things we're looking at, because we realize that that is an issue, the investment to deploy a reasonable solar system on a Bermuda home is costly, and most average persons cannot afford it. So one of the things that we're developing, and we got this idea with our journey to the Caribbean, and one of our very wonderful CARICOM partners, Barbados, which has done an incredible amount of work in this area of expanding the deployment of solar-based technology in homes. They have established a green energy fund, which assists with helping to ensure that average homeowners can realize an investment in solar energy into their homes. Qualifying residents are able in Barbados, with the support of the government and the private sector, to take on these types of technologies. We are actually developing a similar type of fund based on a Bermuda model, and we intend to call it the Green Energy and Environmental Justice Fund, to assist not only residences, but also small businesses to take up the opportunity to benefit from conservation and efficiency measures as well as solar energy. So we're developing a program that will allow that. And we also have a program right now as well, and this will be, this is kind of what's going on now. We have a rebate program now, which actually, unlike originally was set up in 2010, but we have reestablished it since coming back to government, which actually will help even now persons who qualify with the appropriate ARV to actually benefit from a solar installation. So there are ways that we already have in place to do that, but we want to advance this further because of the wide opportunity that there actually is for so many homes to benefit. So our Green Energy and Environmental Justice Fund will help with this process. And I look forward to bringing that proposal to the public in the not too distant future.
So what's the rebate program, and how do people get access to that, and just so that they can benefit, and where are you looking to move that program to help people be able to afford those panels?
Well, the rebate program, it exists right now, and anyone who's interested in benefiting from it, if they desire to potentially install solar energy or other conservation and efficiency measures in their home, they can contact the Department of Energy, and they will give them the guidance on doing that. It's all based on the ARV. Lower ARV will allow you to have a greater benefit. The higher ARV you have a lower benefit. And this is done for an obvious reason, is that our goal is to see that the persons who can least afford the costly level of energy to be the greatest beneficiary. So yes, I'm going to be very blunt here and honest. If you have a house in Tuckerstown, you're not going to have the high benefit of solar energy from my rebate program.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you live in a house in a much more humble area, perhaps somewhere a much more humble residence in a neighborhood, a smaller home with a much more qualifying ARV, you can potentially benefit from that. And we're looking because we want the people who are plagued with the greatest burden around the cost of energy, which in Bermuda is extremely high, to have the greatest benefit.
Now, we've talked about the people owning their homes. What sort of plan does government have to transform all the government buildings with solar panels? I know I've seen some, especially like on the bus stops, have little panels on them. But what's the government's plan to make better use of this?
Well, Don, thank you for the question. That actually is a project that is being led by my colleague, Lieutenant Colonel David Birch, and he can give you more details as to what Public Works is doing to make that transition. There are a number of projects which they are doing right now, which is with a view to improving the energy efficiency within government. And that includes the installation of solar panels on a number of government buildings, as well as other measures. But that is a question that can be answered in more detail by the Minister of Public Works.
Right. Getting back to the jobs, because you talked about yesterday 20 Marines being trained, with solar being such a growth in industry. How much of an expanding field job category do you think this is going to be?
Well, my view is this, and I will make a comparison to two different aspects of our energy infrastructure. Right now, Bermuda's energy infrastructure is based on fossil fuel. There is no real room for a significant investment in that sector, only because the fossil fuel power is produced by one company. So the investment that would go into that, if that was the way we were going in the future, would basically be focused just on the improvement of that infrastructure, which is essentially a monopoly, and it's centralized. If we go towards, as we are trying to realize, a renewable energy future, it requires diversification of generation and other measures. It requires different technology to be deployed in homes, everything from battery storage, everything from electrical infrastructure. It also will create the possibility for microgrids and a more diversified transmission and distribution network that can facilitate what will be essentially thousands of energy persons who are now providing generation in the country, because each house has the potential to generate power and feed it back into the grid. That means that every single person who actually is receiving energy through photovoltaic solar is actually an energy generator. And so that is more diversification. That diversification, Don, means that we need people to actually maintain that. Okay. So we need the level 1 installers. And the start will be potentially 20 additional people who have the benefit of that training. It will mean additional people who understand, who are expertise in the electrical field. It will mean technicians who can maintain what is essentially very much a computerized based and modern technology framework in numerous homes across the island. And so we have an opportunity to create a lot of new jobs based on STEM education, STEM technology framework. But it also means that we're going to have a more diversified energy future. As I told you, not only is solar a part of the picture, but also wind is part of the picture. And our plan is, and not our plan, but actually it's the country's plan, the Integrated Resource Plan, contemplates by 2026, 60 megawatts of wind, which will be offshore wind. That's going to need a whole team of people who will provide maintenance and technological support and other services to ensure that that infrastructure is supported. So we have an opportunity with a more diversified energy infrastructure, diversified generation, a more diversified transmission and distribution network to supply all of the not only residences but also commercial enterprises to create a substantial amount of new jobs. The 20 level 1 installers is just a start, but there's a whole new technology framework that would have to be in place to support this over time, and there are jobs waiting to be created around that. That doesn't also remove the level of investment. That's hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that can come into the island, whether internally or from outside.
This time around, we're bringing in people to help train these installers from overseas. Is there not somebody in Bermuda from one of the solar companies who are capable of doing that, or is that a special certification that no one has?
Yes, it is a special certification, and our plan will be to initially bring in persons who will do the training, but they will train people to continue the training program on island. So then we'll have a if what I can refer to as an ecosystem that helps to maintain itself. So if we can have the Bermuda College or other agencies such as Workforce Development ensuring that we have the suitably trained people on island, then that training can go on island ongoing. And as people seek an opportunity to get into the energy sector, they can get the training. Other islands have accomplished this. And okay, our goal is to ensure that the training meets an international standard as well.
Right.
So, you know, anybody who brings in a system should have the confidence that the local person is doing it is not only meeting the standard of the manufacturer, but also is meeting an international training standard. We want the best to be here in Bermuda, but we also are seeking an independent ecosystem that can support its development. Energy independence is a part of the goal as well, but that means not only with the generation dawn of power, but also with the maintenance of that infrastructure.
Right, so it's not just the installation; it's taking care of it afterwards. We've seen too many things that get built, not necessarily by government. I'm not accusing government of that, but like sometimes things get built, but then they're not maintained.
Yes, Don, and our goal is to make sure that over time that our energy ecosystem will be self-sustaining, so that the people who are not only installing it but maintaining it are here, and Bermudians, whether as entrepreneurs or as working with a variety of sectors within the energy field, will be the ones maintaining that infrastructure, because energy independence is the goal. We are exporting hundreds of millions of dollars outside of Bermuda to pay for dirty oil, fossil fuel, heavy fuel oil that powers the utility. We want to keep as much of that money on island. If in the next 15 years we can cut that down to half, that's potentially tens of millions of dollars that stays in Bermuda, that benefits the economy here. It's not going to pay for a company overseas for their profits. It'll stay here in Bermuda and benefit our residents, and it will benefit our community. That's also a part of the goal as well. Energy independence is actually profitable for Bermuda if we care to embrace it.
Now, because you said dirty fossil fuel, and Melinda Bunny Landy posted a comment earlier talking about healthy as well, and as well as a lot of the residents around Belco aren't happy with all the soot that ends up on the roofs and in the yards and stuff. So just further to your point on that.
Yes.
Yeah. The Finger solar panel project, yes. When is this going to come online, and when can we start seeing some benefits of it?
Well, that project, I do believe, has been, from the standpoint of its construction, been completed. The benefits that would afford, as I outlined earlier, to Bermuda's energy infrastructure will essentially be fed into the grid, the existing grid, and be of benefit to the wider community. I believe that will begin shortly. Saturn, who is the operator, has received their license to operate it, but there are other infrastructure issues that have to be resolved to ensure that can happen. So hopefully, and perhaps you can even speak to Belco about that, when will they begin benefiting from the production of energy at the Finger? They themselves installed a battery storage system on their site in order to, I believe, benefit from the power that will be produced by the Finger. So everybody is getting ready, but it's more a matter of the engineering and technical issues right now as to when that process will start and when the Finger solar utility will begin to operate. So that's a matter for the operators, for Belco, and of course for the regulatory authority, which is actually the body that regulates and oversees the energy industry in Bermuda.
Right. You mentioned Saturn because that's a Canadian company, and recently in the news, they fired the Bermudian firm that's supposed to run that, to run the Finger. And that stipulates part of the contract. There's supposed to be a Bermudian company running it. What's happening with that?
Well, I don't know if your description of the subcontractor with Saturn and their relationship is accurate. But you are correct that part of the arrangement that was orchestrated with the government when we signed the arrangement with Saturn is that once it is installed, it would be operated and managed by a Bermudian company. That remains a requirement for its operation. But again, you would need to perhaps speak with them as to when that will commence. I'm not sure whether the company of concern was in that role. I do believe that company had a very major role with the installation of the actual utility. They were involved as a subcontractor with that part of it. Whether they were a candidate for the operation is not something that I'm aware of, but I would encourage you to raise that question with Saturn or with the regulatory authority.
And as we mentioned earlier, installation is one thing, maintenance is
yes,
different.
And yes, a Bermuda company will be the ones operating that, and that company will certainly be run and operated by Bermudians and by locals. The other thing I'd like to say is that the project at the Finger was a sort of first-time project for the country. So we are very proud that it's been installed and that the partnership with Saturn and its team has fulfilled the goal of having a utility-scale renewable energy plant in Bermuda. So it's the start of us reaching our goal of energy independence. But going forward, Don, I would like to assure the public that it is our intention to make sure that any future utility scale renewable energy projects will first and foremost be done by Bermudian companies and by Bermudians. So some of the work that my ministry is doing now, working with the regulatory authority, is identifying sites locally that will be ideal for utility scale renewable projects. It is our intention to make sure that those projects will be first and foremost be made available to Bermudian investors and Bermudian companies to actually facilitate their development and deployment and their operation. So we want to create opportunities for Bermudians at every level of the energy infrastructure framework, from not only as a power generator, but also as those who will be maintaining that infrastructure going forward as well.
Now, I know we've mostly talked about solar panels, but you did mention wind and being able to collect 60 megawatts from the wind turbines. Where is this planned at the moment?
Well, that is still in its early stages. It is a part of the Integrated Resource Plan framework, which anybody can actually read and review on the Regulatory Authority website. It is a component of us reaching our goal of 85%. Is the 60 megawatts of wind, somewhere between 21 and 20, around 21 or so megawatts of solar. Then we get into some other areas such as biofuel and waste to energy can be added to that mix. But the next frontier is the actual ocean-based wind turbines. We are tilting towards floating solar, which is a much newer part of the family of, floating wind.
Okay.
It is a newer part of the sort of wind turbine offshore family of technologies, but it's quite achievable because it's really based on the same technology that is used for oil rigs, and you're essentially using the same technology to establish a wind turbine. So it's proven technology, and we are looking to see that as that is what will be a part of the energy mix. We are not, although it may be considered, but we are of a preference to see floating wind be a part of it rather than the wind turbines that are anchored to the seabed, because that creates other environmental implications that we'd like to avoid within Bermuda's territorial waters. And also it's more costly in its deployment as well. So if we're going to, and our isolation as a jurisdiction makes these technologies very expensive to deploy in Bermuda.
Right.
So if we can use floating wind, that will definitely change the dynamic on the cost standpoint, but also on a ongoing deployment and maintenance standpoint, because floating turbines and floating wind has more flexibility for movement, but also it's less of an environmental impact with its deployment as well.
Now, I think you may have answered part of this, but Herb Adderley made a comment that wind generators pose high risks both to migrating birds and whales. And there's an editorial comment from him. It's doubtful whether they can be insured against hurricanes. Do you want to address those?
Yeah, those are all questions that we are looking at. So I happy that Mr. Adderley is presenting them for consideration. All of that's been considered. It doesn't change the fact that floating wind, and I want to specify, we're talking about floating wind turbines, not the ones that are anchored to the actual seabed. We've already seen some technologies that actually can deal with the issue of hurricanes and that sort of volatile level of weather. In fact, although it's not floating wind, I had the opportunity to see a quite impressive wind turbine facility down in Jamaica late last year. And clearly Jamaica is a country that is within the hurricane belt, and those turbines have been in place for quite a bit of time. So the issue of hurricanes is not an issue. The issue of insurance costs, I mean, that's a matter for those, perhaps the investors who will take it on. And I would also make people understand is that these are private investment opportunities we're pursuing. It is not likely at this point that the government will be the ones building or investing or like deploying. So this is an opportunity for us to encourage private investors, and clearly those are costs that they would want to factor into what they do. But as I said, in other countries in the hurricane belt, wind turbines are there, they're existing, and they can deal with those sort of wind volatility. And some of the technologies that we have witnessed on can withstand hurricane force conditions. So, but that's a matter for the future. That will be a matter for the investors and those who want to deploy those technologies in Bermuda to consider.
Okay.
But I do not believe it's an obstruction for that.
Yeah. You've been very generous with your time today, because it's been a very interesting topic. So I got one question left, and then we'll wrap it up. Will there be any sort of mandate or move that the island use more electric vehicles by a certain date?
I really appreciate that question, Don. The issue of electrification of transport is another issue that I'm very interested in. When I was a transport minister, I made it a point to ensure that we developed a plan and strategy and a green paper on transport, address the issue of electrification of transport. We actually engaged with the Rocky Mountain Institute as a government, and we have an MOU with them, and they are right now working with the existing transport ministry and Mr. MP and Minister Lawrence Scott to continue with that work. We, as it relates to mandates at a specific time, I will leave that up to the Minister of Transport to perhaps discuss with you. I am very keen to see the electrification of transport in Bermuda a reality. But I will give my answer from this standpoint. There are two parts to it, Don, and if you just give me a little time, I will give it. It's not going to be long. One is obviously from an infrastructure standpoint, like electrification of transport can actually complement the diversification of of renewable energy for Bermuda, because there are ways that a electric car can actually feed back into the grid and actually be a part of the supporting of the use of energy throughout the island. One. Two, there is a real environmental issue, which may be the strongest case that we have. Most of the pollutants that we in Bermuda are subjected to are not from the stacks at Belco or from the stacks at the incinerator in Tynes Bay. It actually is from every petroleum internal combustion engine vehicle that we have on the island. They subject us to an extremely high amount of pollution that is environmentally, it's environmentally imposing, but also from a health standpoint is a risk to our citizens. The quicker we can move away from internal combustion engine transport, the quicker our island can be a healthier place to live.
I experienced a bit of that yesterday. I was behind a truck that was going less than 35K, and the stuff that was belching out the tailpipe on my bike made me a bit nauseous, and I couldn't wait to either it have turn off or get by it.
And I would like people to know that right now, most of the technology that supports electrification of transport is duty-free. So we've already begun to try and create incentives for that to happen. And I'm inspired by islands, again, like Barbados, which actually have more electric charging stations deployed throughout the island than they do gas stations.
Right.
So that's where we need to get. And we need to provide the supporting infrastructure for electrification of transport. I know it's something that that the Department of DPT is also moving towards as well. But I am a proponent of our local auto companies beginning to promote electrification of options more widely so that we can move in this direction. And from my portfolio standpoint, as I've explained, from an energy perspective, it can actually support the wider renewable energy framework that we want to embrace. But from an environmental health standpoint, Don, if we can do that, we will clean up Bermuda in ways right now that will be more healthy for everyone, for our families, for our children, for the whole environment, and to like decrease the amount of carbons and contaminants that we find in our tanks. That's actually what's in our tanks. It's from our cars and our bikes. It's not from anywhere else. That's what you find is in the sediment. And I know this from my environmental technical team. That's what all of the studies find in Bermuda. So the quicker we can move away from these internal combustion engine vehicles, we will clean up our island for everybody's benefit.
I think that's a great way to end it today.
Thank you.
Just to have us be healthy. I really appreciate having you on. It's so easy just to have a conversation going back and forth and discuss these things with you. I'll see about getting you your 5-timer jacket for being on Burn News News. So
thank you, Don. Hey, any little bit of recognition I can get, I will happily take. Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to like speak to your wonderful listening and reading public. I always love the opportunity. Please always reach out, and I'll happily do another Burners Live if the opportunity you feel is important. Thank you very much for the time.
We've had Deputy Premier Walter Roban on talking about one of his big passions. I'm your host, Don Burgess, and it's a beautiful Bermuda day, and I hope you go out and enjoy it. Thank you for listening.